While we're waiting, I volunteered for a COVID vaccination clinic today.
First item will be the minutes, and we just need three of us, and Joy and Gordon will be abstaining because they weren't here for that meeting. So we now have a quorum, and just waiting for Gordon, but perhaps we can go ahead and get the meeting started and get the minutes taken care of.
Move that we approve the minutes for the meeting held on February 2nd, subject to modification.
Second.
There's a second. There's a second. Okay. Page 1. And page 2.
Terry, one thing on page 2 under numbers, item number 6, Comfort Dog Program Update. If one of the things I'm recollecting is the amount of donations that have come in support of the program exceed their expenses.
Yes.
And I just wonder if it's worth mentioning, which is pretty impressive. It's worth mentioning that in the minutes.
I think that's probably true because it was shown on the screen. So probably a good idea.
Okay, good. Thank you.
I had a couple of minor things too under the number 7, the policy on animal trapping on town land. In the middle of the paragraph, it says there was also testimony on trapping being legal in the state, so the town cannot enact a policy, and it should read prohibiting trapping on private land rather than prohibited.
Oh, yep.
And then the next one, on number 8, the second bullet, it's the fire trucks. We had two of them purchased with the bond. And under number 9, other business, it should be talking about the House Government Operations Committee on H-140, the charter changes. If there's nothing else on page 2 or 3, then all those in.
Well, actually, the only thing I had on page 3 is I noticed that at the end, the select board entered executive session at 8:30 p.m. and then it says McCaig closed executive session. I thought,
Yeah, I did.
That's sounds like a Marine drill sergeant calling you out, Terry. So
You'd like to insert Chair McCaig on that?
yeah, perhaps. Okay.
If
I'll make
there's
those
nothing
changes.
else, all those in favor of approving the minutes of February 2nd, 2021, signify by raising their hands. 1, 2, 3, and Joy, you're abstaining?
Yes.
Okay. So we're on to public comment. And is there, Eric, is there anyone indicated that they wish to speak at this time?
Not that's been identified, Terry. One person would like to speak later on in the meeting on another agenda item, and I advised her when that was going to be up. So I don't see anyone else who'd like to speak on another topic at this time.
Okay. Then we'll move on to the Winooski Valley Park District report. And if Nick Warner is ready to present, we're ready for him.
Yep, I see Nick. I'm going to connect you, Nick, and let's see, our representative John is also on it, and Lauren from your office. So I'll check with you once you get connected if I should connect other folks here too. Nick, you'll just have to enable your camera and audio as it's promoted to a panelist here. There we are.
I got it right the first time. How often does that happen? And Lauren has some documents that she'd like to put up on the screen as we present.
Oh, perfect. I'll connect Lauren and should I, John as well? I'll connect.
Yes, please
Okay.
do. Thank
John
you.
and Lauren, I'm going to connect both of you right now as well.
So welcome everybody and
Yeah.
to the select board meeting, and we're ready for your presentation.
Thank you, folks. Really appreciate it. And Lauren is going to put some stuff up on the screen. We put together, there's one document you didn't get from us yet, which is, we just did a very current update document, which we'll also email to you, but we just, this is like up to the minute stuff. And first of all, I just want to, as always, thank the town of Williston for their continuing support over the years. And we've had a great journey together. COVID has certainly thrown us some curveballs, but as I'm sure is the case with parks in Williston, we have been in a good way overrun by users. At the beginning of COVID, it was all about making decisions on whether we should be opening parks back when there was a real lack of information on what transmission issues were. And then pretty much on day one of the stay-at-home order, our parking lot started filling up. And we really became focused on, okay, we want to be the best damn host we can possibly be. And our whole focus this year, not our entire focus, but especially in the beginning, is how can we create a situation where people feel welcomed and also safe at the same time? And I got to say that writ large, our park users have been fantastic. With the exception of some trash dumping when the solid waste district was closed down, we've found people to be incredibly respectful of the parks and the usership. I at times like this, I wish I had some way to automatically count them. I don't think it's an exaggeration to say it's at least doubled, maybe tripled in some parks, day and night, even though you're not supposed to go to parks at night. People go across country skiing at night. And the whole system has been, taxed in a really good way. So I just, we're thrilled about that. We see that even after COVID, a large percentage of these folks have created new habits, and we think it may be a new era for outdoor recreation. I don't know if you're seeing the same thing, but certainly the other towns I've talked to are seeing the same impact on their parks. Specific to our work in Williston, we were thrilled, and this is in this write-up that we did for you. We're thrilled that by the end of the season, even though we did not hire seasonal workers this year because of our concerns around what might happen with funding, that Tim and Remy were able to both maintain our parks and do some work under contract with Melinda for the town of Williston. And that's lit in this document. He laid out the work that had gotten done. That's a model that's really worked well for both of our organizations. In that, it keeps us connected on a relationship basis. It brings in some income to the park district, and it gives you guys frankly, some good, cheap professional labor to get your work done. So that relationship has been great. And, we are making progress with the Jacob property again. I have stayed connected with Pastor Randy Boardman over at the church, who's from day one has been welcoming the concept of hosting a parking lot and trailhead at the church as being a huge positive, both for his organization and the community generally. And right now, Melinda is, I think she's trying to find the original documentation of a right-of-way that goes along the edge of the Global Foundries property, which will connect with the church parcel to complete that pathway. And once we get that in place, we have a verbal agreement from the church, and we want to get the legal agreements written up before we finalize any formal request for a transfer from the town to us to do the park. Because if that access is not secured, we feel the park is a lot less viable, and it would be concerning. It would put a lot of pressure on the area neighborhoods to have cars parking up and down their road and using informal accesses. So anyway, we've lurched forward again on that process. I haven't connected with Melinda over the last 2 weeks, so I meant to call her today, but I forgot before the meeting because I had a trustee meeting also today. But that process is going forward, and the church has just been a tremendous partner, and they're very enthusiastic about the access. So what that would mean is there'd be a shared parking lot that can hold about 10 or 15 cars and a trailhead. They would maintain the trail going up to the edge of their property, and then we pick up the maintenance. We have to build a bridge across that stream to pick up the right-of-way along the edge of the Global Foundries property, which goes directly into the easternmost extent of the property, which I don't know if you remember, it's about a 29-acre parcel. So we're thrilled about that. My board is psyched about it. And we are, once we get that legal piece put together, we'll be coming back to the Conservation Board and presumably you guys to discuss if there's any other issues that the town has and what they'd like to see in any kind of transfer agreement, if that is still on the table, which we certainly hope it is. And it's been a good year for us in that I think it's, you're the last of the presentations I'm doing with select boards. I got to tell you, we're getting a lot of support this year. We went in very conservatively, concerned with the initial data that there might be up to a 30 or 35% dip in revenues at the municipal level. I did a round of communications with various town managers, including Eric, to sort of get their opinion on how we should proceed. So we tried to mimic our towns in terms of being very conservative with our expenditures. As I said, we did not hire our seasonals, which put a lot of pressure on our crew. But frankly, we all pitched in, and we still are. And the parks are looking great. But it looks like the revenue hit is not as major as it could be, but we're still holding our breath until we get past town meeting day to see how fiscal year 22 looks. You can see from the budget we submitted, it is still a very modest budget relative to the services we provide. I feel like it's even lower than what the staff initially presented to our board. They sent it back to us and said, make it smaller. It's been a great process, but it's also very realistic and grounded in experience over the last few years that we're going to be able to accomplish what we need to. Once again, the model is we try to hang on to our capital reserves. We've got 200,000 in capital reserves, and we try to keep at that level. And any projects, we try to use grant funds or donations or in-kind services to support. So that model remains. We carry no debt. And we, our trustees are meeting monthly. John Nittler is your representative. You're very well represented. And there's just quite a few things going on. We finished off our newest park, which is the Durway Cove Park at the mouth of the Winooski River, utilizing VHCB and VCF funding. We completed there was a donation of 10 acres that added on to Colchester Pond. We completed that donation. That's going to allow us to create a new access at some point in the future. And also allows an access for new housing development. So it was a kind of a win-win situation. And there is some very strong possibility of getting some major funding to do capital upgrades across our park system. A lot of our assets, we own several buildings, historic buildings. They're all in good shape and they're all functioning, but from day one in this job, it felt like we needed an injection. So we're going after some funds, which I can't tell you much about now, but I will be able to in a couple of months if we're successful. So we're hoping to do some major capital upgrades this year. We made a philosophical decision before COVID, which was to, even though we had great success with our numbers, with our Soul Camp program, and it brought in a lot of revenue, it was really stretching our staff pretty thin. And we felt like we need to focus on what our main mission is, which is acquisition and maintenance of high quality conservation areas and the incremental growth of our system. We feel great about how that's working out. We expanded the footprint of the Forest Preschool, which is one of our tenants, which means more money in our pocket, which means more services to kids. There was a period of time when everything was shut down, and we were able to get a small grant and a consultant who assisted us in getting funding for the preschool and for the museum, so they didn't have to close their doors, and they were able to pay their staff, and they reopened. And they've, knock on wood, they've been able to function without any COVID issues. We did, like everyone, we did the installation of air filters. We upgraded our HVAC. We redid electrical systems. And so it's been quite a challenging year, but we've really leaned into it and been really energized by the increased use of our parks and all the new, people who've never been to parks before who call us up and, ask us, tell us how much they love it and the questions they have about different parks. And we've asked for modest increase in our budget. The overall budget is lower, but we're asking for slightly more from the towns, and that seems counterintuitive, but that's a result of the intentional cutting of our programs, which meant that, there's a $16,000, I believe it's $16,000 of income that we decided to forego, but that's starting to get backfilled by the lease the lease income that we're getting from Forest Preschool, because we just renegotiated a lease with them. And we also, once COVID backs down a little bit more, we'll be able to ramp up our contracted work with you guys in the city of South Burlington and Winooski, at least so far. We'd like to expand that service. So we're feeling pretty good right now. It was going, last March and April we're touch and go for everybody. But our park usage and the behavior of people in our parks and the support that we've gotten politically has been tremendous. So we're in a good spot now. We're in a better spot than we thought we might be a few months ago. And I welcome any questions about the numbers you see in front of you and our operations.
Any members of the board have any questions regarding the budget?
Nick, I'll start if that's okay.
Sure, Jeff.
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you.
Good seeing you. So I'm on page 2 of the in our packet, and it mentions repaired bridge at Allen Brook, the Michael Lane access. And I didn't understand that was offset due to, and it says folding.
It's supposed to be flooding.
Flooding. Sorry.
I didn't notice that. I'm not looking at it, but I can tell you that's what it was.
Okay.
Yeah, it get knocked out of position.
It makes sense. I should have picked up on the F word that was meant. Wait, that didn't come out right.
Yep.
But yeah. You know what I mean.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Moving on. I'm on the letter that was actually sent to Eric in October 9th. And what I'm picking up on is the request is for $37,204. But I went back and checked my notes about our budget, and I believe we budgeted slightly less than that, $35,060 for Winooski Valley Park District.
Interesting.
So, well, the first question, I guess, actually is for Eric or Shirley is, did I get that number correct?
Or did I make an error? That's a possibility. So
no, I don't think so. If I went through what you presented.
Okay.
I think that number that we included in our budget and that's been set, I mean, it hasn't been voted on yet, but it's been set in terms of sending to the voters. I think we based it on last year's amount for some reason. And I'm sure there's a reason. So if Eric or Shirley, they may not be able to respond tonight.
Okay.
I'm moving to the budget itself, and I just want to make sure I understand. So this budget has already been voted on. It's already been decided. It is the budget for fiscal year 2022.
Yes, the trustees have approved it. Correct.
Okay. I just want to make sure that's what that meant.
Absolutely.
I picked up on the municipal support is going up slightly while the budget is going down, but
correct.
And it seems to me to be the big reason is the you called it intentional cutting of programs.
Correct.
Where last year you had almost 40,000 in that line item as a source of revenue. So my question becomes, as maybe I'm being way too optimistic, but my hope is with the vaccination, COVID, some of the restrictions will start to be lifted. I don't expect we'll ever go back to the world as we once knew it, but hopefully we can progress in terms of what feels normal. And I guess my question is, I shouldn't say I guess, my question is it possible that the district will be able to run programs this summer, or is that no longer possible because of the decision the board made?
Oh, It's just the model has changed. What we want to do is work with other organizations to provide programming.
So that's okay. I read that in your
Yes.
introductory letter. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And I get
So the
Yeah.
answer, but the direct answer to your question is maybe.
Yep.
We actually have talked about this. We have a picnic shelter. That's been a 5-year process to ramp up to that level. So they are a very solid tenant. They give us very solid. But we did give up the interior space for the camp, but we still have a picnic shelter. So we would like to see, we're going to approach Burlington Parks and Recreation initially to see if they want to do some kind of pilot camp program. But we're unsure what COVID's going to be. We're unsure what the restrictions are going to be. So we still have some concerns about it. But it is part of our mission to provide environmental education. Right now, it's being provided to preschoolers through a tenant, but we haven't given up on, Lauren's on the call. She hasn't given up. She has morphed into our operations manager, but she, her background the last couple of years has been developing these fantastic programs. It's just, the problem is it just took too much of a toll on the rest of our operation. There's only 4 of us. I see no reason for us to increase our staffing except for seasonally. And it became clear that other organizations are interested and able to provide programming. We'd started those conversations before COVID hit. And then we just had to drop the ball for a number of months there were too many unknowns.
Okay. And then my last question, or maybe it's more of a comment, is in the past, Williston has, I'm trying to think of what the best, commented on, maybe is the best way to put it, on the formula that's used to determine the municipal participation. Mm-hmm. And as I understand it, the board was willing to take a look at that. Is there anything you can provide about, has the board looked at it? Is there a possibility that formula will change in the future?
It goes in cycles. We certainly have not even talked about it for the last, year, in all honesty. We've had very intense looks at it, and we've done a lot of number runs using poverty levels, using acreage, so on and so forth. And I think my board keeps coming back to feeling that it's the simplest, most progressive way that we can divvy up the pie. If it goes to acreage, then the whole concept of us being a regional organization really becomes a different approach. And I'm not sure it would be politically viable. So we have not avoided the issue, but every time we go into it, we look deeply, we look at the numbers, and then we come back to feeling as if the system we have in place is actually potentially the most progressive one that we can do that's simple enough for people to understand. I was putting together algorithms, and people just had to stop me at some point, because I am interested in poverty levels. I'm interested in impacts on municipalities based on people's real ability to pay. It just gets so complicated that people can't understand what it is we're coming up with, and then it becomes, the more mysterious it is, the more difficult it is to get people to buy into it. But I'm more than happy to go back to my board. If you guys have a specific, if you want us to take another look at it especially with a specific angle, my board would be happy to do that. We meet monthly. They're very engaged. It's a conversation we're very willing to have.
Okay, good. We may get back to you.
Okay, good. Yep.
All right, that's it for me. Thank you, Jeff. We have a couple of minutes left before the public information hearing. Does John have any comments he wishes to make before we sign off?
Not really. It's been a good, I guess it's almost 2 years now since I've been on the board. And I find the organization to be very vibrant and active, considering that they only have 4 people. They seem to be very responsible and responsive to needs. And the first thing I did when I joined the group was go out and walk all the parks. And I've been doing a lot of walking this year because there's not much else to do. And so I can contest that the parks are very active and receiving a lot of recipients and users. So it's been good.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your service to the town on this particular board. So I appreciate it very much. And thank you, Nick and Lauren, for your presentation tonight. And thank you again. And we'll perhaps be in touch with something about the funding.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
So it is 7:30 and time for the public information hearing on town meeting 2021. Eric Wells and Shirley Goodell Lackey will do the presentation tonight on that. And take it away, Shirley and Eric.
Thanks, Terry. I'm getting Shirley connected here. And for folks watching at home, I've got a presentation we'll be going over for about 15 minutes or so, and then there'll be an opportunity for any questions for staff on town meeting 2020. So I'll get the presentation on the screen here. Hi, Shirley.
Hello. Jeff, and to answer your question, you're right. We missed the increase in their fees. I look back at the budget and I will look back at the letter from October, and it does say 37,204.
Well, stealthy way to decrease it slightly.
Right, I think I got it all set. Can everyone see the presentation okay?
Yes.
Okay. So I'll be doing a couple things at once here. I've got notes on the side and presentation on the screen and Zoom going on too. So for folks at home, I'll be doing a couple things at once here. But good evening, everyone. Thanks for tuning in this evening to our virtual public information hearing on Town Meeting 2021. We'll also be having a second public information hearing as required the day before town meeting. And we're doing it this evening as well to give folks an opportunity to learn about the articles on the ballots a little earlier, as I know early voting's been going on right now, so folks can be informed before they cast their ballot. So town meetings can be a little bit different this year with COVID going on. And I'll just start off by reviewing some key dates. So as I mentioned, we have our first public information hearing tonight. And there'll also be a second opportunity March 1st using Zoom as well. And this will be instead of the in-person meeting at Williston Central School as is usually held the night before town meeting day. Voting by Australian ballot will take place on Tuesday, March 2nd from 7 in the morning to 7 in the evening at the Armory. And again, absentee and early voting is available now. There's a number of ways to request your ballots. I'll get through at the end of the presentation. But for the board as well, I checked with Town Clerk Sarah Mason today, and we have just about 600 absentee requests received so far. And Sarah told me in a normal year, we usually get about 500. And last year with the presidential primary, we were around 600 as well. So we expect some more requests to come in the next 2 weeks. So as folks review the town meeting warning and ballot this year, they'll see the general fund budget proposal is the main article under consideration. There are a couple other articles I'll address later in the presentation. But before we jump into the fine details a bit, I just find it's good to take a step back and look at what a budget is. So a budget's a plan. It includes the services that be provided, the cost of those services, and the revenue to pay for those services. The budget is the best revenue and spending model with the information available. And as staff worked through the budget proposal last fall and the select board reviewed it in December and January, COVID-19 certainly added another layer to the review process this year for the budget. And as we look at some of the bottom line numbers, the proposed operating budget is just over $11.5 million. And this represents a reduction of just under $100,000 from the FY21 budget, or a 0.86% reduction in operating expenses. With this proposed budget, the projected property tax rate is level at 0.2750 cents. As a reminder, the final rate will be set in July by the select board after the grand list is finalized this spring by the town listers and through the assessor's office. And I'll address this further in the presentation, but the grand list is flat in this budget projection per town assessor Bill Hinman as we looked at revenue projections moving ahead. So I'm going to toss it over to Shirley now to take a closer look at some of the numbers on the expense side of the budget.
Thank you, Eric. So Eric has highlighted the major changes by expense classification. So wages, we're looking at a 3.2% increase. That is primarily, we have a 1.4 cost of living increase built into the budget and a 2% merit increase. There are some reductions in wages in there as well, in positions, I should say, that offset that 3.4% if you do the math. Debt service increase looks big, but we have the three projects that are in the budget. First of all, it's the 1.4 million that we're going to talk about later tonight with the bond documents. But that was the debt service approved by the voters in March of 2019 for the 2 new fire trucks that are being built and to be delivered in early April. The other new debt in there is our share of the Muddy Brook. That's the bridge between South Burlington and Williston. That's $900,000. And last is the fire station roof. The asphalt shingles did not hold up quite as long as we hoped. So we're looking at $100,000 of debt, short-term debt, probably like 5 years, and replacing the asphalt roof with a metal roof that is projected to last 50 years. In regards to the programs, it looks like we have a decrease of 20%, but that's not really true. It's really in relation to the library budget. We used to split out the general library services and IT and program wages would become program expense. All of the library wages now sit in the wage budget. So that number just moved from programs to wages. So unless there are questions, we can go to the next one, Eric.
Yeah, but I think we'll probably go through Shirley and then we can look if there's questions from the public.
Okay.
And here's the graphic.
Oh, I have a cat nudging my leg here. So this is a graph of the departments and how much of the budget each of them makes up. So what I'm going to talk about in here is something that you don't see. So I'm looking at a chart, which you don't see, that shows this year FY21 versus FY22 budget. I just wanted to talk about a couple of the larger increases, but still not huge dollars. But we'll look at the town clerk budget first, clerk and elections. There's actually a 22% decrease in that budget, which is only at 2%. But one full-time position was eliminated from the town clerks, and that is replaced with full-time with benefits. And that's been replaced with a very part-time position. And also all of the treasurer's wages have been reallocated to administration, to finance, because the treasurer really reports within finance now. The other planning and zoning is only 4% of the budget, but they did have a 7.1% decrease year over year. And that is primarily the decrease in their consulting fees, their miscellaneous planning studies, which has to do with the implementation of the form-based code, because part of that was started in the FY21 budget, expected to be finished in the FY22 budget. Parks and Recs, 4% of the budget, but they do have a 14% decline in their budget. And that is primarily, again, related to the pandemic. We were hoping to hire, actually it was in this year's budget as well, another full-time recreation person to help with additional programming. But with COVID, we have put that off. in the FY22 budget not to begin until May, prior to the start of all the summer programs and camps and contracted programs and contracted camps. So fingers crossed that the pandemic and the status of vaccination will let us get back to a little bit more normal programming for the community. Outside services, 5% of the budget, but there was a 7.6% increase, and that is primarily our contribution to the Chittenden County Public Service Authority. It's a $34,000 investment, and that is the regional dispatch that we are looking at. And unless you have questions, those were the largest changes year over year in budgets. So we can, and actually, I think at this point, Eric, it gets tossed back to you to talk about revenue.
Thanks, Shirley.
That's a good question.
Talk about the other side of the budget here is the revenue side of how services are paid for. And I've got a graphic on the screen that lists our main revenue sources, among them property taxes, local option taxes, and a number of fees that are collected for town services. And in developing the FY22 budget, a primary area of focus was the revenue side of the budget. COVID-19 has affected a number of revenue streams for the town. And as we look at kind of our big three areas of revenue, it's property tax, local option tax, and town fees and other income sources. So in any year, an impact on one of these three major areas would cause a close examination in the budget process. And in this year, we had impacts in all three areas to consider as we prepare this budget. And we're hopeful positive news will continue with COVID moving ahead, but this budget takes a conservative approach to predicting revenue. So I'm just going to briefly touch on each of these three areas and how it's been impacted in FY22. The local option tax, we use information to help predict what those income receipts will be each year. And based on our modeling, we're predicting a $25,000 reduction that we've put in the FY22 budget. We use data from March to December of last year to see what the COVID impact was on our local option taxes collected. We typically budget these using a 3-year rolling average. So as we look to address that average in this budget, the last year was certainly affected by COVID to not make it a usual year. As we looked at this, our sales revenue over the last year for those receipts was expected, and this is the vast majority, the greatest amount of local option tax collected from a percentage standpoint. And this was a little greater than we had budgeted in our current fiscal year, FY21 and FY20 when we were looking at this. Rooms and meals tax, on the other hand, was much lower. And our financial model continues to scale back that income from rooms and meals and gradually decreases that impact over the year as we hope COVID's impact has diminished over FY22. Next, when we look at user fees, investments, and other income, there's a $93,000 reduction in that revenue stream. A couple items of note there. Previous years, the town clerk's office has been able to offer passport services. Currently not sure when that may be able to occur, if it will be able to be a service that's offered moving forward. And also the investment income for the town has been decreased by about $64,000 in the budget. This is based on the economy and how well the town's funds are receiving returns that are in certificates of deposit and money market accounts. We've predicted based on the current interest rate trends there. And this is offset a bit by an increase of about $75,000 in recording of legal documents predicted due to the current real estate market primarily. And finally, the property taxes in the grand list. As I mentioned, the town assessor advises to budget using a flat grand list due to the current economic climate. And this is a big shift. Williston's grand list has grown 1% to 2% most years for the last 20 years. And the final grand list will be set in the spring, and we're taking a conservative approach based on the assessor's recommendation at this time. So I share an awful lot right now, and we look, how do we address these revenue stream changes in the budget proposal? The use of fund balance for property tax relief has increased about $76,000 in this budget. And as I mentioned, the expenditure lines are decreased about $100,000 to offset this revenue decrease. So with a visual of this, when you look at the pie chart of how the town collects its revenue, typically think of these three buckets. Property tax is about 50%, local option tax is about 25%, then everything else, the last 25% that makes up the revenue streams for the town. And Shirley, I'm going to toss it back to you for a brief discussion on property taxes here. Then I will have some time for some questions, or tax rate rather.
So with all the unknowns while we were developing this budget because of COVID, nobody having their little crystal ball and like, how long will the pandemic affect us? How will it affect our taxpayers, our businesses? What happens when the government funding stops? The select board made a decision to keep the tax rate flat to reduce any impact on our taxpayers and trying to manage, their own budget with the current economic environment. So as Eric already said, our tax rate remains flat. The taxes reflected here, $275 is based on $100,000 grand list value. If you want to slide ahead.
Yep.
So this is reflecting Williston's tax rate history over 13 years. So over 13 years, our tax rate has increased 0.075%. Pretty amazing, and I think some awful good financial management of the town in regards to looking at revenues and expenses and minimizing the burden to the taxpayer. We have another chart, which we don't have in here, but it shows the last 5 years. And if you were to look at the last 5 years of taxes on a $100,000 house, the taxes would have increased $12. That's pretty amazing considering all other costs would not have gone up by just $12 over 5 years. I just think we've done a good job, we meaning the people who work for the town and the select board, to maintain and improve services while, minimizing the financial burden on the residents of the town of Williston. And then the last chart, I think, is pretty impressive too. For several years, Williston has had the second lowest tax rate in the county, with Charlotte being the lowest tax rate. So again, kudos to folks prior to me and the select board for working hard to keep the financial burden at a minimum while providing services to the taxpayers. And I'm back to you, Eric.
Thank you, Shirley. Just a couple other items to mention before we wrap up. So there are some other articles on the ballot that voters will see. Article 1, and I should mention, these are typically voted from the floor at town meeting. And since we can't have the regular in-person town meeting this year, we've put these on the ballot for approval. So Article 1 is to set the dates for tax payments. And Article 2 is to accept the annual report. And as I mentioned, there's a number of ways to request an earlier absentee ballot. You can contact Town Clerk Sarah Mason by giving her a call or an email. You can visit the state website portal to request an absentee ballot. The ballots have arrived and they're being mailed out as requests come in as quickly as the town clerk's office can process them. And then if you do request an absentee early ballot, you can return it in the postal mail. There'll be a prepaid envelope provided for any ballots requested. We also have our drop box behind Town Hall, the drive-up drop box that was installed last summer. Or you can drop off your ballot at the Armory on March 2nd between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. And it will be opened for in-person voting if you prefer to vote in person that day as well. And if you're interested in learning more, we have the complete operating and capital budgets for review on the town website. Annual reports have arrived. I'll have it on the website tomorrow. We have a few hard copies available. If anyone would like to request one of those, please contact us in the town hall. I'll have another public information hearing coming March 1st. And always questions are welcomed and encouraged to myself and town staff. Please reach out to me with a phone call or an email, and we'll make sure your question is answered. So that's the end of the slideshow. Let's see, stop.
So if anyone's stopping at the library, Eric, I did deliver a big stack of the town report as you go in to pick up your books or craft kits or whatever's been supplied right between the library doors. There's a big stack of town reports there, so they're available there. Self-service.
Shirley and Terry, that's the end of our report for this evening.
Good, thank you. So is there anyone in the audience that wishes to ask a question or a comment?
Anyone who'd like to ask a question or comment, if you could type in the chat or raise your hand, we'll get to you to answer your question. Let's see, I have a question in the chat. Just asking about total dwelling units, and that's not something I have readily available, but I can certainly follow up on your question, David.
Any other questions before we close the meeting?
I don't see any additional questions right now, Terry.
So folks will have additional time to ask questions. Perhaps they'll develop those over the next couple of weeks when we have our next informational meeting on March 1st. So at this time, then I need a motion to close the public information hearing.
So moved.
I'd move to close the town meeting 2021 public information hearing.
Second.
And seconded. Is there discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, the meeting is officially closed then, and we'll move on then to a couple of items before we get to 8 o'clock on the Black Lives Matter. And that is number 6, the highway mileage certificate. And Eric, just a brief explanation of this since we took action on this 2 weeks ago.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep you here for a minute, Shirley. Yep, so this is the annual certificate of highway mileage for VTrans that each town's asked to approve. The state requires all towns to certify the quantity of highway mileage on an annual basis. And this requires the calculation for the local highway aid at the state level for all class 2 and class 3 highways. So the board may recall last week approved a 1.96 miles in added class 3 highway in Finney Crossing and Hamlet development. And this certificate reflects that addition to the town's overall highway mileage. So to approve a motion would be in order this evening.
So would anyone wish to make the motion?
I move to approve the 2021 certificate of highway mileage.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So unanimous vote again on this one, and move on then to the temporary easement Route 2A path project. And I guess Eric, you're on this one as well.
Sure. Yep. I'll take care of this. So the board has in its packet the state of Vermont's preparing to construct a multi-use path on Route 2A, projected construction timeline of 2023. The state's requesting a temporary construction easement for use of the town right-of-way on Hurricane Lane during this project. The town would be compensated $500 for this temporary easement. Public Works has no objections to granting this easement, and the select board has the authority to grant these easements. So it's before the select board tonight for consideration.
Request.
No, I'm just very glad to see this project is moving forward.
Yeah, that's what we talked about for a number of years.
I'd be looking for a motion then.
I move to grant a temporary easement to the Vermont Agency of Transportation for the Route 2A multi-use path project and to authorize the town manager to sign any required documentation.
Is there a second? We have a second from Ted. Is there any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unanimous vote. Before we go on to item number 8, I think we can at least do one more, and that's the VCDP subgrant agreement in the old North End Community Center. And Eric, you're talking about that?
Yep. So the board may recall we recently had a public hearing to close out this grant, and there's been a number of items to work through to get the sub-grant agreement together for the town to pass through the $100,000 for this project. So I've been working on this, number of parties involved with the town's attorney, Champlain Housing's attorney, and the state of Vermont. And the agreement is just about finalized. I have the town attorney taking a final look at it. So this is required to be in place before the town can fulfill its obligation as the pass-through entity for this project. So I'd request for the board tonight a suggested motion to authorize entering into this agreement once the town attorney is satisfied with the language and recommends a signature by the town.
Before the motion, was there any questions for Eric regarding the?
Eric, I just want to be sure that there's nothing in that, the agreement that we should be concerned about. I mean, I assume the answer is no, you would have told us, but I just feel like I want to double check on that.
Sure. No concerns on my end, Jeff.
Okay.
The nature of these projects, sometimes it's can be complicated funding mechanisms to work it all out. And this has some unique circumstances. Nothing concerned on the town's end here. It was really between CHT and the state to satisfy their requirements.
Okay.
I don't have any objection, or the town attorney doesn't either at this time.
And hopefully, just a brief comment, I appreciate, the previous town manager, Rick's, and now your willingness to do this, for other communities. I think that's, I don't know what else to say. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
I was just going to add to that, Eric, or to answer your question, Jeff, most of the burden after this ongoing burden while this grant is in place is really just gathering and looking at their financial statements if they have a single audit and making sure they keep insurance on the property. So there are some steps that we do annually, but they're not all that time intensive after this process is done.
Yeah, but it still adds something to your, I assume, quite full plate. So, again, thank you for your willingness to do that.
We're working on that.
And I should share as well that the CHT will reimburse the town for the legal costs required for the review of this sub-grant agreement.
Okay, good.
So no, I'd be looking for a motion.
I'd move to authorize the town manager to enter into a sub-grant agreement with the Champlain Housing Trust for the Old North End Community Center project after the agreement has been approved by the town attorney.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Unanimous again. Thank you. And we have a couple of minutes. Perhaps we can do the VCDP grant closeout, realizing resource. Eric?
Sure. So this, you may recall, along the same lines, the town was also awarded as a pass-through entity a grant of $150,000 for realizing resource project, which enabled Resource, a local nonprofit, to purchase the building on Harvest Lane that it calls home. We're also preparing to close out this grant and would need to schedule a public hearing as required to close out this one as well. We're looking at March 16th as a date for this, and I would just ask the board to consider scheduling this public hearing this evening.
Any comments or questions for Eric? Hearing none, are we looking for a motion on this as well?
I'd move to schedule a public hearing required to close the VCDP grant project entitled Realizing Resource.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've taken care of that. I think we'll wait on the other item of business until after we deal with the Black Lives Matter message installation request. And at this time, I'd ask Eric to give us a brief introduction to the subject matter. After that, we'll open for a limited number of questions from the audience, since we've had 146 comments. written comments. And we've had a goodly number since then on emails. If you've already commented, I'd ask you please to hold back your comments. If you have something brand new to give us, then we'd be more than happy to hear that. So Eric, your introduction.
Thanks, Terry. The Select Board received a request from a group of residents in October of 2020, asking the town to consider the installation of a Black Lives Matter message. After additional discussion in December, the Select Board provided a public comment period on the request through January 15th of this year. Comments were submitted through the town manager's office and the Community Justice Center. As Terry mentioned, the comments have been compiled and provided to the Select Board prior to this meeting, and we received over 140 written comments through emails and phone calls during this comment period. The board has this request this evening following the comment period for further discussion on its agenda.
Thank you, Eric. So we'd be looking for people who wish to speak briefly on the matter using civil discourse, so that if we find that there are unsavory comments, I've asked the town manager to be prepared to mute people who do not follow those rules. So we'd be looking for, at least I have two people I know, that, or maybe three now, that would wish to speak. And Eric, if you could channel those people in.
Yep. First, I have Cindy Provost, who contacted me earlier today. Cindy, I see you logged in. I'm going to connect you to allow to speak at this time. Just a moment.
Welcome, Cindy.
Hi. Hey, Terry. How you doing? Hi, everyone.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have sent an email in already with comments, so if there's other people, but I really, really think it's important to ask a lot of questions on why, what it would accomplish, how people would feel about it, and how it would. So questions that I had that I felt would be, what do you think approving this request would really do for the people as a whole in our town? How would it divide our town more or less? Would it really improve how people act or think? Do you really see any great problem that it would solve? The town has very strict criteria in the historic village. Why? I don't know how to present that. I feel like to add anything other than our state flag and the flag that we all hold dear as what represents our country and what the freedoms it offers would deface our town. In a historic district that you really strive to have everyone that lives in that historic district and all the criteria you make them follow would then be affected. I think that, like I said, the questions I just posed, how is this going to change anything? How are people going to feel driving through our town? I hope that we aren't making any decisions based on just what other people are doing and thinking in other towns. I really think this is a serious matter that really will affect how people think in our town. And I personally feel it's going to be more of a something that's going to divide the town more versus bring it together. I feel like our town's always been, there hasn't been any issues. I know when my kids were in school, there's never been any issues. Everyone was treated the same. I feel like we're all very respectful of other people. I don't feel like we have to have a banner that's politically motivated to make people think that we're all going to include everybody in our town. I think it's really the wrong message to send. That's kind of what I'm thinking. And I won't take up any more of the time. I have more to say, but I'll let other people say it based on an experience I had with graduation last year, and my child that graduated, and the message that sent, and how our young people are going to take these messages if they really knew and understood what these things depict and stand for, and how divisive they can be with how messages are sent and taken by everybody. So that I'll stop there. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
1 second here. Let's see. Just checking the list. So next I have a request from Brian Wheel in the chat. Brian, I'm going to connect you just a moment.
Sure. Hear me?
Welcome, Brian.
Hello. Thank you for letting me speak. I guess I just have an issue with this. I have many issues with this, but the real issue with the town, putting this forward for me has to do with that. It's not a race organization. That's not what it's based on. It's a political organization. And if you read the letter that we're looking at here with the request from September 10th, you can see the other political agenda items that are on there. I mean, why would we ever fly a political message at all? Because we know that politics itself is divisive. And I don't see any need to have that in the town. We're all Americans, we're all Vermonters, and those flags are there because we sit underneath that organization. We don't sit underneath the BLM organization. And I don't want to see that message is purported forward. I just don't believe that's that's a direction that we need to take. And I don't think it's really a race issue. I just don't. There's a lot of roots to that organization that have communist and Marxist roots. And that's directly from the individuals who started the organization. I mean, it's their speech I'm getting that from. So, I want to refer back to our town charter where it says that a public official should always demonstrate respect for others and for other positions. And by allowing this, I feel that our town charter is being violated because you're not adhering to other positions as it's a political thing, not a race or inclusive thing. That's just my opinion. And the last piece that I'd like to add is I kind of take offense at this last piece. It says we can move forward towards making Williston a just and caring community. Williston's a great community. Like I take offense to that wording at the end. I just have an issue with it. So, I mean, with that, you guys can have it back and do what you need to do with it. But I oppose it personally for those reasons.
Thank you, Brian.
Let's have a hand raised from Jerry. Jerry, I'm going to connect you at this time.
Hi, I'm Jerry Greenfield. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I am strongly in favor of having a Black Lives Matter flag. Somebody brought up the question, how would you feel when you're driving through town if you saw a Black Lives Matter sign? And as a Williston resident, it would make me feel incredibly proud that Williston was willing to use its voice to talk about having a more just and equitable society, recognizing that this country has a history of enslaving people and that it has not been equal. And that, as many people say, it's not a matter of being racist. You can be not racist, but to address the inequities in our history, you have to be anti-racist. You have to be willing to speak out about things that are not right. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
And the last request I have is from Sherry. Sherry, we're going to connect you to speak.
Hello?
Sherry, you're connected to the select board.
Hi, thank you. I submitted written comments, but I want to both echo the last commenter about feeling pride to see a Black Lives Matter sign or symbol in town, a flag, another symbol. The purpose, in my perspective, of stating Black Lives Matter is to recognize that we have a system that has not always recognized that Black Lives Matter and continues to show in so many ways that our systems of justice in this country are not equally applied. I saw in the paper, the Williston Observer, a comment, I think it was, I guess, an op-ed about that stated that it would be a divisive symbol or sign. And the first person who commented on this said she had a lot of questions. My question would be, if people find it to be divisive to say that members of our community or members of our country or members of our state matter, then I think that what would be equally important would be to have a forum where we could offer more anti-racist conversation and action and education so that we can not only have a symbol showing that we believe our town to be a welcoming and wonderful place, but also a community that's invested in moving forward together and growing together. I think it would be important to hear more people's perspectives. I heard commentary here that people are all treated the same, and I know how I'm treated, and I'm treated great so far as I can tell. I don't know that everyone has the same experience, and I don't know that we've heard everyone's experience. And I know in this country and in the state, there's documentation that people have not been treated the same. The reports about the people who've been pulled over by the police and in Vermont, reports on how Vermont state representatives have been treated in the local legislature show that we do have problems with treating people of all races equally in the state of Vermont. Not saying that necessarily applies in Williston, but I don't know the answer to that. And I think that this isn't just about a symbol, but it's about a conversation and about learning and growing together, and any opportunities within our town to connect with each other and do better by each other, no matter who we are and what our perspective, I think would be a great step forward too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terry, I've got one person that commented to me earlier that they would like to speak this evening, and I have at least another 5 or 6 folks who have raised their hand. I'm checking in how many more comments you'd like to take this evening.
I'd like to cut the questions off at about 20 after 8, so that if people could be brief, that would be very helpful.
Okay. But I've got folks who've raised their hands, so I'll go there and then see what time it is. But next I've got Brant, and I believe you're under Marcy's sign in. So Brant, I'm going to connect you at this point in time.
There we go. Okay, can everybody hear me?
We can, yes.
Okay, I want to thank the board and Eric for this opportunity to speak, and I'm going to try to stick to my 2 minutes. I appreciate it. I'm part of the Citizens Racial Justice Group, that has requested a Black Lives Matter message be displayed on town property, but I represent myself here. Now, some say that displaying a Black Lives Matter message in Williston would be wrong because a small group has made this request. But this small group is not alone in wanting to take a stand for racial justice. Our Williston schools, CVU, and the Federated Church and many surrounding towns have already honored this request. The unspoken argument among some is we don't have to deal with these racial issues because, after all, Williston is 97% white. That's an issue other communities where there's a greater number of minorities needs to sort through. Such an argument is wrong. It's important for all people to come forward, including whites. Silence perpetuates racism. Modeling human decency in every community is important, and it needs to come first from our leaders, like our select board. The power of leadership's influence on public opinion can't be overestimated. A frightening negative example of this comes from our own former president. The creation of a racial equities partnership committee is a step in the right direction. But if the select board is going to use this group as a substitute for their own voices, it would be a step in the wrong direction. Now is the time for the select board to follow the lead of our chief of police and schools and make an anti-race statement. I ask each individual board member, as this is a public request, where do you stand on the issue of displaying a Black Lives Matter message on Williston town property? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next I have D. Francesco. Apologies if I mispronounced your last name. I'm going to connect you to speak.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. My name is Carolyn DeFrancesco. I'm almost 70 years old, and for my entire life, I have benefited from not being a person of color. I believe that the goal of erecting a BLM flag is not to change anyone's mind. Only you can change your mind. And it's not to make you feel something, to feel ashamed or to feel any one particular way, but it is simply to let the community know as a whole that there are people among the community members who notice, who are aware of the advantages intrinsic in being a member of the white community. And I think it's important to our sisters and brothers of color to extend that community to everyone of every race. And it's very difficult to lead by example if we don't have an example to look to as we drive into our town and we see a Black Lives Matter flag. I notice this on my own street. I am proud every time I see that, and I think here is part of a community that notices. I'm going to make my comments, bring my comments to an end, but to iterate my support for a BLM flag erection in the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, next I'll connect Amy Brewer. Amy, just a moment.
Hi, can you all hear me?
We can.
Hi, thanks so much for doing this tonight. I've spoken and I've written, and I just wanted to reiterate how important I think the flag is as much as a symbol of what the select board can do to make our community amazing for all. And I think it says boldly that it's important. It says boldly that you can start to look through our policies and the things under the town's purview to make sure that we are being anti-racist and inclusive, so that, you know, the folks who've spoken today about never experiencing it, so that all the residents can say that in the future. So I don't have anything more to add. I just wanted to say thank you for continuing to hear our feedback and for continuing to look at this issue.
Thank you. So it's about 20 after 8, and I'd like to close comments at this point and go to consideration by the board of the issue. So, Joy.
Terry, may I be allowed to make a brief comment?
Of course.
I still don't believe that we as a select board should be having this as an agenda item. And I think that it goes against what our purpose is, which is town governance. I made that statement in October when this topic was first brought up and had been labeled a racist and white privileged. I've been the recipient of hate mail and had a constituent say to me, perhaps it would be best just to go along. I stand by my statement that as a select board, this is not what our function is. And it's now as an agenda item, I'd like to offer the following. I won't be bullied, intimidated, threatened, or shamed into making a decision that I found wrong and not representative of the majority of our constituents. This is a very difficult and divisive issue. And given that we as elected officials have not been given a clear direction, we shouldn't be voting on anything. BLM is not about racism. It's a political organization with a very clear message and mission. I would ask how many of us have thoroughly read that mission statement. There are ways to combat racism, but the raising of the BLM flag is certainly not it. This board was given a number of comments on this issue, and it's a fairly split community. It's interesting to read and note that the fours are based mostly on emotion and the against are based more on political facts. The depth of the against comments weigh heavily on BLM as a political organization, and many comments were factually supported. If this passes, then other organizations will decry the same right to fly their flags. This isn't about the phrase that Black Lives Matter. This is about raising a flag of a well-organized political organization that has a very set, defined, written, radical agenda. I would refer you to that list of demands on their website, and please think long and hard before making a decision to fly their flag. I would respectfully ask you, my fellow select board members, to focus on what we are actually charged to do and not get us embroiled in a political decision that I feel sets a bad precedent going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Joy. So this is a time for the board to deliberate. If somebody would like to make a motion, we can vote it up or down. And I'd like to have a positive motion so that we know that we're voting. But a yes vote means yes, a no vote means no.
Well, Terry, I'd like to do that, but I'm wondering if I'll make a motion and then we'll see if it gets seconded and then we'll have comment on it. See, Gordon.
Yeah, Terry, could I just make a quick comment before Ted decides to make his motion?
Sure.
You know, this is a very critical issue, I know, for the town. And, you know, I know where I stand because I have lived in town my whole life. I've considered myself a person that respects anyone and would help anyone at any time. And I certainly value the movement to make social and, you know, equality for all. But I also feel that 5 of us on a select board, that's a heavy load to lift to make a decision on whether to present a message or not a message. And I'm not trying to be a fence straddler in any way, but I would really like to get input from all the town residents because I feel this is something that's really close to everybody's heart. And I just feel like the folks that have come forward tonight, I respect your opinions, whether you're on one side or the other, but we're only getting a small image of the whole town. And I really want to get a pulse on what the entire town feels before we decide to move forward or not move forward with a message. Thanks.
What's your thought on that, Gordon? How do we accomplish what you were talking about?
You know, I don't know if it's getting a survey, Terry, or putting it out to a vote, or how that would work. I'm you know, certainly still an infantile member to the board here, but I certainly value our board and all of our thoughts and opinions. But I just feel like this is a huge matter for our whole town, and I just want to make sure that all representatives have a say.
Thanks. And Jeff, you got a comment?
Sure. I guess I'll start it by saying I am ready to vote. I would like to vote tonight. I think I don't know if it's possible to get more input from the community. I mean, since October, I think we have been seeking input, and we've gotten, I think it's 142 plus or minus comments. Rarely do we, in fact, I'm not even sure I remember an issue other than when we vote on, let's say, a ballot item, that we receive this much comment about something before the select board. So I feel I'm ready. I hope it's okay, and stop me if it's not. I did want to pick up on a couple things I heard tonight and also read in as many of the comments as I could get through. And one is this association with a Black Lives Matter flag with a Black Lives Matter organization. I don't believe that's the case. I believe they are different things. I've got the Black Lives Matter organization's website up in front of me. There are certainly things in there that I could see where people would find divisive. There might be things I find divisive in it. That's not what I'm supporting when I would support a Black Lives Matter flag. And then the other piece of it is somebody mentioned, you know, the concept of raising a Black Lives Matter flag or message and helping to make Williston a just and caring community. I believe we are a just and caring community, but it doesn't mean that racism doesn't exist to some level in Williston, and we need to do better. And that to me is the message we need to get out, is that we recognize that. And to me, that's the easy first step. The hard next step is going to be putting that into action, actually making Williston a more just and more caring community. That's the hard, long-term part. But we need to take that first step. And it takes some courage, it takes some strength to admit that racism does exist in our community, and we want to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Gordon?
Yep. Just one more briefly, Terry. You know, folks know that I am an educator. We have worked in our local schools, my school, to promote social equality. And I firmly believe that is the way to go. I think my suggestion is I just want to make sure, I know we get feedback, and this has been a very hot topic with the response we've got, but we have a lot of voters in town. And I just want to make sure that before we decide to do something, that we have a lot more input than just 142. Because I know where my heart is. I certainly want to move this forward. That's where my school is at. That's where I'm at. But I want to make sure we get the whole pulse of the town. Thanks.
Thanks. So we live in a representative democracy, and this board has the ability to make a decision one way or the other. And it could be done tonight, it could be done some other time, but we've been deliberating on this now for several months. And in my own mind, I'd like to have this decided quickly, that we're not going to appease everybody as far as whether we vote yes or whether we no. There'll be people who are not happy with the decision that we make, no matter what we do.
Yeah. So Terry, if I could say a couple things.
Sure.
I also looked into the Black Lives Matter platform. There's a lot of it I just don't agree with. As I'm a moderate, and I don't agree with a lot of stuff that is too far one way or the other. But I've never really associated with the phrase Black Lives Matter with the organization. I know a lot of people here tonight have said that is wrong and that that's the only way to interpret it, or the predominant way to interpret it at least. I did do a little bit of research on it, and I did find that the Columbia Journalism Review said that the media should refer to it as two separate things, a movement and an organization, and that they're different. I also started thinking, and bear with me because this is a little, probably a little shows my nerd side, and maybe, and this is only by way of example for the words, not anything to do with anything. But I noticed that in church, in my church, we use the phrase that we believe in one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And then I went to, that's the Roman Catholic Church. Then I went to an Episcopal church with my wife, found out that they say the same thing, one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. I went to a Lutheran church, one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. The word Catholic is used over and over again, and it doesn't take too long, perhaps even right away, to say, wait a minute, words have different meanings. That word doesn't mean Roman Catholic, it means universal. So when it comes to, the phrase, I hear what people are saying, but I'm not too hung up on it. I am going to be supporting some kind of the flag going up for some period of time, and I'll be making a motion in a minute. It is an exception for me. I don't generally like the town to get involved with issues that are not nuts and bolts town governance things. But that being said, I'm very sensitive in my own life to racial issues, and hate crimes have gone up. The Associated Press reported a couple of months ago that they've gone up more in the last decade than they've gone up for 10 years. So I don't have an issue with having the town do something about this. Now, that being said, I want to be clear. I don't believe that if people don't agree with that position that they are racist. And for that matter, I don't think that if you're in favor of that flag going up, you're a Marxist. I'm not. I guess you'll just have to take my word for it. But I know, let me, call out, Joy, you got hate emails and stuff. That wasn't fair. That wasn't right. You're not a racist. I know you're not. You are a good woman, and I will defend you all the way down on that. So, this idea that, we cleave one way or the other on this. That being said, for me, though, one of the issues that comes down is that, as I said, I'm going to be in favor of something, but I do agree that this is the historic district. And so I don't want this to be something that goes on and on for, forever. There have been movements and slogans and powerful slogans that have outlived their time. I don't think this one is going to do that for a while, but I do think that it does. Hopefully one day it will. But that being said, I'm not in favor of it going on forever. So with that, I would make a motion. I wrote it down. I'd move that the town of Williston display the Black Lives Matters flag for a period to begin March 1, 2021 until Monday, June 21st, 2021, so that the flag would be flying on Saturday, June 19th, 2021, a date known as Juneteenth. That is my motion.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it to initiate discussion.
So we have a motion made and seconded, and now there is discussion on the motion.
So Terry, I noticed in the chat a question, and I think this person hit the nail on the head. I mean, I definitely could see this as a ballot question, because I just feel this is not just 5 people's choice. Even though I'm in favor of moving this forward, I just want to make sure we have everybody's voice, and I don't know if that's possible, but I just need.
Well, that would require a special election, or put off until.
But it just feels like this is a very, very powerful thing that needs attention, and I don't want to dismiss anybody that might be on the other side of the aisle.
Thank you. So we have a motion made and seconded, and for discussion on the motion.
Ted, I'm curious about your thoughts about wanting to put a definitive end date on the flag.
Yeah, well, a couple things. And when I use these examples, I don't want them to be taken out of context. Okay. I am an unofficial student of history. I read a lot of military history books, and I very much regret that I never served in the military. And so I don't say anything negative about this, but there are POW MIA flags that are still up from the Vietnam War. Now, some can say, well, that's for the current wars, but there really aren't that many missing in action POWs in the wars that we've had since then. But those flags, I was in Washington a year and a half ago for my daughter's soccer game. Go figure that. And those flags were still up. And I thought, okay, my older brothers are in their late 60s and they did not serve, but they're the age that would have. And I just, it doesn't, I just think there has to be an end time. The other thing is it is in the historic district, and I do think there is some merit to that. I mean, if there isn't an end date on it, then we're really changing what is and is not allowed in the historic district in an issue that a lot of people have strong feelings about. And I hear that. Again, I really think that in this issue, people who have strong feelings about it are going to disagree with whatever we do anyway. If I say it should be up forever, some people will say, okay, finally. And again, it's the idea that if you disagree with something, then you're not strongly against racism or something. And I just like, oh, come on. But that's the idea of it, is that, it doesn't mean it couldn't possibly go back up. But it'll be there for a, significant amount of time. We voted on it during Black History Month, and it'll be up during Juneteenth.
Okay. Would it be possible for the select board before that end of the day to have a discussion about whether to keep it up for an extended period? In other words, just because we initially say a certain time frame doesn't mean we can't extend that down the road.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we don't, as under select board rules, I mean, it could be brought up and asked to be put on the agenda under new business someday. It doesn't even have to be part of the official agenda. So yeah.
The legislature uses this all the time as a sunset provision, and if someone wishes to raise the issue again before the expiration date, it can be done. Joy?
I think you all know how I feel about this, but now I'm going to go back to Gordon's comment of going, why does it feel like you folks, and Jeff, I'm not meaning this in any other than the direct manner it's meant, but you're putting your particular thoughts on something that you want going in perpetuity. And I still don't feel that we have anywhere near a representation of the community that we are supposed to represent before making this kind of a decision, whether it's for 30 days, 60 days, or forever. I I think we're way overstepping our bounds. And again, please don't take that as disrespectful. Yeah. It's just a direct comment.
Yeah, I'm not. And the other question I have is, if I remember correctly, your motion that's currently on the table that I seconded is a Black Lives Matter flag. Okay, I want to make sure I got the flag piece correct. One of the things I like, and I've been reading in some of the comments, boy, they've been coming so quick, I can't keep up with them, is the concept of maybe using some group to design a flag. I mean, the Black Lives Matter has to be part of it, if that's part of the motion. So I guess I'm wondering, is that something that needs to be addressed as part of the motion, or our role is to?
It could be, and actually one of the other possibilities, and again, I think we get in trouble, which any way we turn on this, because that's why it's fun to be on the select board.
Okay.
But one wonders if Black Lives Matter is so polarizing because there is an organization that has taken that name. Maybe something that says, no racism, or the word racism with the no U-turn thing through it or something like that. I mean, I don't know. It's a little less on point, but it's not complete. But it's still is the right message.
There are other communities who have had contests about designing flags, and there's no reason why we couldn't ask the staff to start thinking about the process.
Okay. Well, I mean, today is the 16th, so we have not even 2 weeks.
You're thinking about doing it between now and February 1st?
March 1st, yes.
March 1st.
Yeah.
We are not going to be meeting again until March 6th.
So as I understand the motion, it's a Black Lives Matter flag with the word, which would, to me, mean it has to include the words Black Lives Matter. To do a racism with the no U-turn allowed symbol on top of it, I don't think would necessarily substitute, in my opinion.
Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, I'm going to call a roll on this rather than have a show of hands. So the question before you is, should we adopt the motion as presented by Ted or not? So a yes vote is for accepting the motion, a no vote is against.
And would you mind reading the motion just before we vote? That'd be helpful to me. Thank you.
Move that the town of Williston display a Black Lives Matter flag for a period to begin March 1, 2021 until Monday, June 21, 2021, so that the flag will be flying on Saturday, June 19, 2021, a date known as Juneteenth.
Thank you.
So if there is no more discussion, I will call the roll. Ted?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
Gordon?
You're muted.
Nay.
Joy?
Nay.
And Terry votes yes. The motion passes 3-2, and we will ask the staff to get the appropriate flag and display it on the flagpole at Town Hall starting on March 1st. So thank you all. And we'll need to move on then to...
Terry, one quick question.
Yes.
Could I request at this point that the select board meeting before was it June 21st that we have an agenda item to discuss the flag?
Yes.
Great, thank you.
So let's move on then to the bond closing documents for the purchase of fire trucks. And I think Eric and Shirley will be talking about this.
I'm going to defer most of this to Shirley and get her reconnected here to go into the fine details of bond closing documents here for the board. So I'll get Shirley reconnected here.
Hello. So, as you probably all of you know from previous bonds, these are all the required documents that need to be signed by a variety of Eric, the treasurer, and the select board in order for us to participate in the bond closing that I believe is March 2nd. Don't quote me. For our $1.4 million for the purchase of the fire trucks. The funds from the closing will actually go into a bank with the trustee, and we will get reimbursed. So the town will be paying first, and then we will process a document to get reimbursed for those funds expenditures. So I read through the documents. There's not, unless you have questions, there is nothing in these documents that are different or unusual. The certificate and resolution is what allows us to participate in the bond closing. There's a loan agreement, and that's just like any loan that if you take out a mortgage, right? It's the loan agreements that sets up the terms and conditions for the borrowing and specifies the repayment schedule. And I know that you've all seen this, and a lot of the example that you have is blank because until the bond closes, we can't fill in a lot of the documents. The tax certificate is, so these bonds are tax exempt. So anyone who purchases the bonds, the interest is exempt from federal taxation. And the tax exempt certificate is what we sign and agree to say that at the time of the closing and going forward, there are certain things that we will or will not do to continue the tax exempt nature of the bonds. And that again, my first closing through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank, but previously worked with the Vermont Health Education Finance Agency, and the language is pretty much all the same. With the one big difference being that the bond bank actually takes care of all the tax exempt, post-tax exempt work. We have to just do a certificate annually, and they have to take care of all the arbitrage calculations annually for the bonds. I am just skimming down through, there will be the repayment schedule. I'm trying to see if there's any, the municipal tax certificate, again, goes back to making sure that the bonds that we maintain the tax exempt status of the bonds so that we essentially follow everything in these agreements. And I don't have a lot more unless people have specific questions about these documents. You will see them again in their final version. Jeff looks like he's got something.
Sorry about that. So I tried to skim through these. It's worse than when I closed on our house. But the one thing I couldn't find was the interest rate.
The interest rate isn't known until the bonds are actually closed on. So they go to market, and it's the rate that is determined on the date that they go to market, which I said, I should have written this date down. I believe it's March 2nd they're scheduled to go to closing. So when that bond deal closes, because it's not just ours, it's, whatever municipalities are borrowing, that all comes together as one closing. So these are our little portion of the bond documents. The bond documents are probably 3 or 4 inches thick to include everybody in that closing. So the repayment schedule will not be known until we know what the interest rate is, which will not be known until it closes. And
Okay.
actually, it's March 4th.
Oh, March 4th. Okay.
Yeah.
What does your crystal ball suggest the interest rate might be?
I think, well, I was looking at something the other day, Jeff, and I want to say it closed at 1.74%. So I think we have 4% in the budget, but I feel like it's definitely going to be less than that. I mean, the rates are very, very low right now, and tax exempt rates tend to be lower. So if I had to guess, Jeff, I'm thinking we're around 3% plus or minus.
Okay.
That would be wonderful. Great for the budget for sure.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
Any further questions for Shirley? I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move to approve the bond closing documents for a 1.4 million capital equipment bond sale through the Vermont Municipal Bond Bank to finance the purchase of 2 fire trucks approved by the voters at town meeting 2019.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion now on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we unanimously approved of that. Thank you, Shirley. I appreciate that very much. Signing of these, does this need to be a signature in person or electronic?
It does need to be in person. So Eric will coordinate that with you and leaving documents. Sorry, Eric, I'm passing the buck there, but
That's okay, Shirley.
leaving documents on the counter to sign.
But we'll have these along with the highway mileage certificate. I'll get those prepared for the board tomorrow morning and leave them out for signature this week.
Good, thank you. Manager's report.
All right, I've got a number of items to address this evening. I think we'll start with the finance report, though. We have Shirley connected. I distributed Shirley's report earlier today to the board for the December financials. And I believe, Shirley, we're going to give a brief update on the FY20 audit as well.
Sure. I didn't write anything up for the FY20 audit, but we're getting there. So I have, you've all seen the audit and how many pages it is, and it's definitely, I was in public accounting for my first 5 years in the world, and then many places after that. These are definitely the most complicated financial statements I have ever seen. But I have worked my way through them with the help of the auditors, and I have all of the tables and the numbers part, and I'm working on the notes to the financial statements. So I will have all the numbers parts to the auditors tomorrow, and I've gotten probably halfway through the notes. So I'm hoping by the end of the week, I'm wrapped up and it's in their plate, and they probably will have questions back for me. And then I have the management discussion and analysis. So, and I'm hoping by next week, we might have a draft, the person I've been working with, we have actually gone through a lot of the numbers together, as I can't quite figure out how things work together, but I will say I have a much better understanding of the financials than I've ever had. So even though it's been on the weekends for me really working on these, I feel like I really understand them now. So thanks for your patience, but if I own them, I have to understand them, and I feel like I have a much better grasp on them now. So that's the status of the financial statement audit.
All I can add is better you than me.
Yeah. Well, I have to say we've had a lot of discussions, and you've heard me talk about them before and praise them. But I'm looking forward to their management letter. I mean, even if they don't have things in that letter, we had a lot of discussion and a lot of just accounting changes, and we have so many funds that I can close and bank accounts we can combine, which has been on my list. It's just sort of pressuring me to get there. So we've had a lot of discussion about how to make things easier. So, hopefully after the next month or so, I'll be able to start working on some of the things we've talked about. So now I'm unless somebody has questions on that, I'm going to go into just a quick review of the December financials. So I'm going to start off with some really good news. So today, so in your report, I actually said the local options tax would be out any day. Well, we got it today. And the good news is it is $76,600 more than our first quarter report. So, and that was all in the area of the sales tax. The rooms and meals tax came in almost identical to the first quarter. So that was a piece of good news. And as Eric and I were discussing today, once I have the financials completed, my next step will be to do another projection of our financials and where we'll think we're going to end FY21 to see if there are any other cost-cutting measures we need to make, and a couple of decisions that Eric and I have been talking about. So that'll be the thing you see for March 16th meeting. We'll have that projection or analysis ready for you of where we think we're going to end FY21. So I'm just going to talk about property taxes for a moment. So property taxes as they appear on your financial statements are not quite at budget, but what happens is when our system bills property taxes, we of course are collecting right for the state as well. So when it bills, everything gets charged to property taxes. So we get a preliminary cash flow statement from the state and says, okay, this is how much is going to be due to the state, and this is how much is going to be due to CVU. So I move that out of revenue and I put it over in a liability account, and we pay out of that account. At the end of the year, those initial estimates are always too high. So I do expect that come the end of the year, when I have the final cash flow from the state in May, that our budgeted taxes will probably be a little higher or right at budget. And there's one other change in that cash flow, or in our property taxes in the past. We've always reflected this administrative fee that the state gives us for doing all the billing and all the collecting of the taxes. We will now reflect that in a different line item in the financials, because that is really a fee for our service. It's not property tax. So it's in the property tax budget in FY21 and FY22. We've corrected that. So if we have a little variance, that's about $70,000. Okay. I'm just going to look at some of the big things. We talked about local option tax already. We've talked about public safety being, under budget, and that's going to continue that way for the rest of the year. There's no doubt about that, since most of the things in those fees we don't are affected by COVID, so we can't do services we were doing previously. Highway revenue is significantly over budget right now. It looks really, really good. But part of that is our stormwater billing. So that's the highway performing services for the stormwater utility. That is actually above budget right now. They did a lot of projects this summer. So that alone is 118% of the FY21 budget. But they do have the quarter. So this quarter in the winter, of course, it tends to be quieter. And when the snow melts, they'll start doing some projects again. And also in the highway dollars is about $40,000 that we received from FEMA finally. We booked that when it's received based on the Halloween storm of 2019. So that's also affecting the positive flow there. And expenditures, highway is at 52% of budget, but really they're doing even though we're halfway through the year in December, it should be 50%, but really their retreatment budget is $480,000 and they've spent $475 of that, which says in many other lines, there's lots of small savings in there. So even at 52% of the budget, that's retreatment budget, almost all spent for the year. So they're doing really well. And we'll still see costs for salt and some of that still come in through the end of the year. Fire has they're only at 39% of budget. The big share of that is just with the call staff, as it has been for a few years. They don't have the numbers, and therefore they don't have the salary. And we did in the FY22 budget bring that down a little bit. And there is a savings in salary because we hadn't filled the deputy chief position until January. So the deputy chief's position has been filled in January by Tim Jerry, which Eric has already announced. And we just filled the captain's position again and made a movement. And Eric will tell you about that. Let's see. I'm just looking for some big things because I don't need to read this all to you. Some of the variants, like in regional social services, health, and transportation, those look like, wow, they're really big compared to budget, but many of those all bill on an annual basis and we pay them up front. Green Mountain Transit, we pay 2 times a year, so we have 1 payment left there, so that's a little lopsided as well. I'm trying to think if there's anything else really big in there that pops. No, so I'm gonna, that's the general fund budget. So I think as we look at the water, stormwater budgets, those continue to look the same they did for the last few years because the revenue is high, especially in the area of the other revenue and allocation fees. And again, those are fees for the big projects. I've sort of outlined what those were for water and sewer. They had hook-on fees for Northridge, Cottonwood Crossing, Community Bank, and those are large fees paid up front. So that's generating that favorable budget variance. Mm-hmm. And let's see, the state, so through COVID, the state revolving loan fund, some of our sewer and water debt, the interest was forgiven during COVID. So that has made a favorable impact on some of our interest expense, but also the interest expense from Essex for the plant capacity, their interest was forgiven. So directly we see the result of that as well in a favorable variance.
Nice.
So yeah, it is very nice. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with the next. So unless you have questions, those are the big things I wanted to point out. When Eric and I are keeping an eye on the legislation that's coming down because municipalities are particularly being mentioned in the funding that's coming. So we'll keep our fingers crossed.
You could provide us a copy of the local options tax document you got.
Sure.
Any other questions for Shirley?
No, good job. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. Thanks, Shirley. And I'll pass on the board that local option tax report tomorrow. I hope to have a little more time to review it today, but time got away from me this afternoon a bit. So we'll take a closer look at that analysis moving ahead here.
Yeah.
So I've got a number of things in my written report, a couple other items to briefly share with the board this evening. The fire union has submitted a letter for the January deadline I received to negotiate a new contract. Theirs is up for expires on June 30th. So I've had an initial meeting with our management negotiating team, and we're working with the union to set up what that process will look like in the next few months. As Shirley mentioned, I did receive word from Congressman Welch's office last week regarding federal aid to local governments. It's in committee in the House and Congress. I've seen some initial projections. I don't want to share the numbers quite yet. They are promising, but I know there's a ways to go. So, hopeful to have some local direct aid to the town from the federal government through next discussions here. And then when we get to that point, we can take a further look from a staff standpoint and bring that to the select board to think about use of those funds if they're allotted to the town moving ahead. And as Shirley mentioned, pleased to pass on to the board today that senior firefighter Prescott Nadeau has been promoted to the rank of captain. He will assume that promotion coming up next week on the 22nd, I believe. So a big congratulations to Prescott on his promotion. He's been with the town over 10 years now. So I was pleased to accept Chief Collette's recommendation last week for that promotion and rank to Prescott.
Nice.
And then I also wanted to update the board this evening that the Racial Equity Partnership Group has continued to meet. And this was a group I organized last fall. We were kind of calling ourselves looking at a possible coalition at first, but I think we've settled on the Racial Equity Partnership right now with a few folks from the community. We've been meeting every couple of weeks. So our next step, and we're going to be launching information to the community this week, is looking for additional individuals to join what we're calling the steering committee. And this group is going to really work towards establishing and solidifying this partnership's mission, vision, and strategic plan moving ahead. So we'll have information in the Observer and a number of other outreach vehicles for folks who are interested to submit a brief application in a number of ways. And then this group will work and plan how to have folks join the steering committee. And that's just kind of the first step here. When forming a group is always a large task to undertake. So kind of looking at what that will involve and then kind of thinking about next step at a community scale. But we've had a number of good conversations and additional folks who have joined our meetings so far. So we're looking forward to the work ahead with that group and kind of growing that and then bringing it to the broader community as we move forward here. And then another piece, I have it in my written report as well. What I'm looking to do, I've been in the manager role just over 6 months now, and I've been looking at our operations, and I've left the position that I previously held open during that time, partially for budgetary reasons and also for me to evaluate the needs of the administration moving ahead. I am looking to fill that role. I'm going to take a closer look at it still, but my initial thoughts are looking at the assistant to the manager role, but by expanding its human resources functions for the position. The job description does call for human resources work, but in speaking with staff, I'd like to take a closer look at that job description to bring in more human resources, direct operational tasks for the role to aid in our recruitment for someone with background and skill set in that as well. So I'll be taking a look at that over the next month, and if there are some changes, I'll be bringing those to the select board if it changes the role significantly. But I'll keep the board updated on my thinking and plans there. But to go along with that is in looking to bring someone new into the office is our physical space in the town hall. And we've I know if you've stopped by, we've done a couple changes downstairs. Out front, we have kind of one open desk area now, and you might remember a few years ago we had about 4 people sitting out front near each other, and we moved the town treasurer into the office I formerly occupied, and thinking moving ahead, having another person potentially join the town staff is looking for another office space for nature of position and trying to maintain our social distancing now and after the pandemic, so we don't have folks working right on top of each other. So I'm looking at the storage room upstairs of the town hall. If you picture the office I'm sitting in right now, directly above me in the corner, opposite of where Lynn Keefe sits on the other side of the building. I believe it's possible we can transition that space to an office, but the first task at hand is where do we put all the files that are in that room? So staff is reviewing. There's some things we can have past their life that we can dispose of them. Others we can store in the brick church, but then there's other documents that we'll need to keep in the building. So we're thinking about in the meeting room itself, in the back wall, potentially looking at some cabinets we could put in for some document storage. We're running out of space in the town hall as we look at some of these things. We're getting a couple estimates and ideas of what that may cost this week, but considering it may be a change to the room space upstairs, I just wanted to bring that forward to the select board tonight before we took any additional progress there, as we're in the exploring stage right now.
So just a couple quick things, if you don't mind, Eric. No objections to building those cabinets if they're in the meeting room, with the caveat that they have to be of a material and design that they can support the food served at the legislative breakfast. And hopefully we'll have next year.
Yeah.
The other thing is, and I'm sure you know about this, look at digitalizing, the records as much as possible. But I do want to talk about the new position. And I hope this is a simple yes or no question is, when were you thinking about possibly hiring into that position? And really my main question is it in the budget to fund that position?
Yep. It's remained in the FY21 budget, and it's in the FY22 budget as built. My timeline is, ideally we look to recruit that position this spring, but all things considered too, it's kind of getting an idea when's the right time to recruit for something like that, and for folks who might be looking for a new position at this time. I've had a couple brief inquiries with other towns who have looked to hire recently, just to get an idea what the market's been like for professionals looking to make a shift. But I've met with staff a little bit on this, and I'll keep the board updated for a timeline. But certainly we identifying that we've got some needs to fill here to help with our administrative capacity, and would hopefully be sooner rather than later.
Okay. All right. Good. Thank you.
Any other questions for Eric? Speak of the new position, or refilling an older position. I'm not sure when Eric has time to sleep, because he is so busy with doing things that need to be done, and we need to have that position filled at some point in time, in a combination of position to help fill the HR role would be well deserved.
Okay. Thanks, sir.
Anything else, Eric, on manager's report?
No, I think that concludes my report for this evening. It's a busy time here in the town hall, but the staff's all are working very hard, and as we gear up for town meeting and doing our day-to-day operations here. So all's good on this front.
Good, thank you. The last item on the agenda is the other business, and just a few things on that. On Thursday evening, Gordon and I are going to be on Town Meeting TV, formerly Channel 17, at 6:45 as candidates for Select Board. And our next meeting that I would need to have the Select Board at is the March 1st informational session before town meeting. All of us should be there to participate and answer questions if needed. And the next Select Board meeting is on a month from today, the 16th of March. And so we get a little bit of a reprieve, but don't take it too seriously. And last on my list is thank you all so much for your work tonight. This was an unpleasant meeting, to say the least. Very difficult for all of us. And thank you for your comments. And we'll work forward to work through this. Is there any other business that we need to take care of tonight?
Just a quick question. Ted, Joy, do you want to get together and think of some really hard questions we can get an alias to call in and ask during the Select Board?
Good idea.
It is a call-in show, so yes.
And
anything else for this other business?
I will share, Terry, the annual report has arrived. We've got some hard copies. I'll find the ones for the Select Board with Sarah tomorrow and leave those in your mailboxes when you stop by this week.
Can we pick up extras for people that we know that want them to?
Yeah, I'll check with Sarah. I can certainly leave those on the mailboxes as well.
Yeah. Okay. Good. If there's no other business, this is your chance. Then we'll be adjourned.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night,
everybody.